Hi, you guys. This is just loading for a second, but today you guys are going to be doing a warm up. You will be, I'll go through announcements as usual, I'll go through the agenda as usual, and then once you're done with this ed puzzle, you will be moving on to a new activity. So to start, you should have your lab notebook in front of you. If you don't have that, go grab it. And we'll go through the warm up. I'm not going to go through the answers today. We can review them next class, but I will go through them in this ed puzzle. If for some reason you need to go back to these warm ups, these are in the slideshow. So for this next slide, this is your first warm up. So warm up number 4, number 1, you're looking at this graph. And the question is, what was the global surface air temperature range in August? So I'm looking for a range, right? A low number and a high number. So this is a little graphing practice. This is relevant to our current unit, humans in the biosphere. So that is your first warm up. If you need to pause for a second, you can do that now. All right, warm up number 2. So you've done warm up number 1. Warm up number 2 is this graph right here. And this question is asking, when did global temperatures start rising? So you can judge kind of in general, when did you see an increase in global average temperature? So take a moment to read through this and write down your answer. Remember, for warm-ups, you do have to write the question and the answer, so make sure it is dated with today's date, the 19th. This is warm-up number 4, and you got 2 questions down and 2 answers down. Excellent. So for our announcements today, obviously I'm not here today, so presentations will be next class. That does give you a little extra chance to do any final touches. I will not be giving you time next class to do final touches since you've had a little more time. Please share the presentations with me though. So at some point today, decide who in your group can share the presentation with me. That'd be very helpful so that when we are ready to roll next class, I have them all. And then one thing that I just want to repeat multiple times today is you need to use data from your slides for your script today. So we're kind of moving from, you guys are wrapping up your slides, which is a really nice way to kind of get feedback on your research. Your peers will be giving you feedback on what research you came up with. And also to make sure that you have found relevant data. So as we moved into writing your script for your PSA today, it is really, really important that you have relevant, accurate data to draw from. So for today's agenda, first thing is you're watching this ed puzzle. And then second thing is you're working on the script with your group. And there's a script outline posted in Schoology and the class calendar. And I'll show you where both of those things are in this ed puzzle. I am going to just give you a little few tips right now to kind of talk about what you should be looking for in this script. And so let's go through that on this slide right here. So you guys hopefully are able to find this slideshow, and you can go to today's date in the agenda and it'll pull up the warm up. But there's some really good examples in here. And these examples are also in the main document for this assignment, which I'll show you that in a second. But let's go through some tips for making a good PSA script. So as you guys are writing this script, you should really have picked a relevant issue, which I worked with you guys last class, so we should be good there. Okay, make sure it is a relevant issue. Number 2, explain it in an easy to understand way. We have to assume that the people that are going to be listening to this recording, right, are your peers. And not everyone remembers freshman biology, or maybe they haven't heard of this issue before. So make sure you're really explaining the issue in an easy to understand way. Third thing, reference what local organization you are using. So this can be really helpful for students to realize like, oh wow, there is an organization in Aspen or in Roaring Fork Valley that is working towards solving this particular relevant issue that you picked. If you are having issues finding that particular organization, head back to our original document with all the steps listed where you guys can find those resources. Okay, and I will go through that document again in a little bit. Don't make stuff up. Triple check your facts. Every year I have students writing down facts that I simply don't trust, and it turns out that they aren't, in fact, from a reputable source. So really double check your facts. Make sure you are referencing everything, so you don't have to reference it during your particular, like, PSA. You don't have to say like this was published in 2012 or whatever, but you should say like, hey, here's a stat, right? You might list the stat, then you'll say according to, and then you could list the organization, right? So I could say according to EPA, the number of squirrels in Roaring Fork Valley has tripled in the past 3 years. That's not a real thing, but that is one way that you can include um, both the reference and the fact during your PSA script. Another thing you need to do is explain what the public can do, and this is a feasible action item. And I'm going to go through kind of what does that mean, a feasible action item, in just a little bit. But you want to make sure that what you're choosing, right, the issue is relevant, but also that the solution is relevant. Number 6 here, there's a list of excellent examples that you can click from, and that's all, again, this is all clickable. All these you can click on when you go to the actual slideshow, not this Edpuzzle, or into the actual document. And there's so many more options. Ask me if you need an idea. So if you are like, we're not entirely sure what action items are available, jot some down, get them in your script today. And then when we meet next class, the whole day is going to be dedicated to kind of you getting feedback on your research from your peers, feedback from me on your script. And if you need ideas, I'm definitely there to help you guys out. And then last but not least, make sure the solution is accessible to all community members, actually solves the problem, and doesn't just move the problem. And that's what I'm going to now segue into a little discussion of this idea of moving environmental problems around rather than addressing them. So let me go into those notes and then I'll go back to Schoology and make sure you guys know where everything is, okay? So part of moving environmental problems is environmental justice, right? And this is something that you guys really have to be mindful of when you're suggesting a solution. Environmental justice is essentially saying, hey, we need to make sure that like all of these things, housing, environment, transportation, health, that these are part of a community that everyone can access and it's not just going to be accessible for certain individuals. So here's a pretty interesting graphic right here. So this is pollution exposure by population. And you can see that Latinx Americans and Black Americans are 63 more likely to be exposed to pollution than they produce, where we have non-Hispanic white Americans at a negative. It's 17% less pollution than they produce. And so there is a really large disparity between who is actually exposed to environmental degradations, including various forms of pollution. Right here we have, I mean, these are only 3 examples, but there are incredible numbers of examples where disenfranchised communities have been exposed to some pretty gnarly environmental conditions. So Detroit, Michigan, you may have actually heard of this one, but there's a massive oil refinery that's there. It's over 80% Black, and they actually have the most polluted zip code in the entire state. Los Angeles, California, LA County, Black and Latinx residents experience greater rates of asthma and hospitalizations than white residents. So that's some really interesting statistics there. And then Isle de Jean Charles, Louisiana, that is the country's first climate refugees, and that's due to logging and oil extractions. And again, these are just some like quick examples. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is this is something that isn't new, and I think it's really important that you guys are aware of it before we start talking about solutions to the environmental problems. This is something that, again, like if you look at these stats, race is the most significant predictor of a person living near contaminated air, water, and soil. And so, say your environmental issue is water pollution, you have to be mindful of like who is this pollution actually affecting before you give a solution out. So again, something to kind of just be mindful of. I want to make sure you guys are approaching these solutions with all the information available to you. And then how did this happen? So typically, like if we go back to these stats, right? So if we look at who is exposed to pollution, what typically happens is, if we go back to this slide, what typically happens is you have disenfranchised communities that don't necessarily have strong voting rights. They don't necessarily have language acquisition in order to understand the laws and their rights around environmental issues. And so people want to, say, have a coal power plant, right? but they just don't want it in their backyard. And so there's this thing called NIMBY, not in my backyard, where there has to be a place for it, just not here, right? So cool, yes, we need coal burning power plants. I want to turn my light switch on and be able to see what's going on in my house. I want to be able to have electricity in my home. So I want a coal burning fire plant, but I just don't want it near my house because I have, whatever, a family, and I want to make sure that they're healthy. So I'm going to go ahead and vote, and I'm going to talk to my lawyer friends, and I'm going to have all these connections where I can make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, if I wasn't able to vote, if I didn't understand the legislation, if I didn't have my lawyer friends, I would not be able to convince that um, those group of people that are in charge of building this coal power plant to not put it in my backyard. And so what happens is with this concept, people are able to push environmental problems towards areas where people aren't going to be able to really say anything, or they don't have the power to stop it. And so the problem is moved and not solved. And so when you guys are doing your PSA, make sure you're not just moving the problem. Make sure you're not just saying like, oh yeah, like we need to make sure that we do not have um, industry in this Roaring Fork Valley. We need to move it somewhere else. Again, that's not a solution. You're just moving the problem. So just be mindful as you guys are going through this. Here's a nice cartoon. Look at this. Those wind turbines totally destroy the natural landscape. Meanwhile, they are developing and ruining natural habitat, cutting down trees in order to have a beautiful home. But it's, again, just be mindful. Like, these people think that they're in the clear when in reality they are not actually helping out at all. And then here we have NIMBYland. This was published in 1991. This was based on various stories on various topics, all of which involve NIMBY. And this is a sentiment. And there is, again, here's a little sign talking about where all these things that people don't really want and where they should put them instead. And so I mentioned environmental health, but you can see homelessness, nuclear waste, prisons, low income housing, garbage dumps, noisy industries, toxic waste, free sex offenders. Like, this is all things that people are like, we don't want this here. And so this doesn't just fall under environmental issues, but it certainly is very relevant to what we're talking about. So let me back up here. So this is just like a, hey, you should know that this exists and be mindful of what solutions you're recommending. But let's go to Schoology just so you guys can see what is where. Okay. So if you go into Schoology under Unit 3, you're going to see two things you need to pay attention to. So hopefully you found this one. This is the Edpuzzle link. You could access it a different way. I posted the code multiple places. But then the second thing you need to look at is step 3. So public service announcement, step 3. So if you click on that, you're going to see a couple different things here. I kind of just pulled the key points from this document right here and put it in here. So let me show you a document hopefully you recognize. It's the lovely yellow one. Here we go. So we've done step 1, done step 2. These are some of the local organizations you could potentially reference during your PSA. We did our slideshow, right? And now we're on to step 3. So here's the script outline. So it says make sure that your PSA clip, we're not doing the radio, will include a sentence from each group member so that everyone's voice will be on Skier TV. So when you're doing this outline, what you will notice is little tips and tricks at the top. And you have to start with this and end with this. So here is what this says. It says, make a copy of this document and share with your group. So please go ahead, do file, make a copy, share with your group. And then as a group, you guys really need to decide, what is the flow of our PSA? How do we want to have a Skier TV segment, and what order do we want to put it in? Who's going to talk? Yada, yada, yada. Realize that you don't have to record yourself, right? You can. It can be a powerful way to get a message across, but you can also just have your voiceover over graphics. Notice I said here, you can have engaging and relevant graphics. So we make this a little bigger. So to start, you're going to say, we are 9th grade students from Aspen High School. We recently researched environmental issues and we want to help save our local ecosystems and our planet. And then I'm sitting around with my group and I'm like, okay, cool. Hey, Lynn, I'm going to then say, did you know And that's actually a really good way to start. Did you know that, you know, squirrel, or we'll say dog populations have increased tenfold, right? And then the next person, Susie, would say, that means they are disturbing wildlife, or whatever. I could say disturbing wildlife. And then the next person could say, we're going to say Joe is going to say something like, when you walk your dog, consider leashing them. And then I would go into switching back and forth between my peers, Susie and Joe, and kind of making sure that, and these can be much longer sentences, but like making sure that the relevant information is spread equally amongst your peers. And so each one of these bullet points is going to be a different line, and you obviously should be increasing, right, the number of lines. So don't think that it's just limited to the number of lines that I have right here. Please use them all up. So what I'm expecting from you guys to see is next class, I should see a full script. I am giving you feedback next class. That's the only time I'm going to give you feedback. So you have to have this script dialed. Please, please, please focus today. If I come in next class and you haven't worked at all on your script, I'm going to be pretty upset. Things are not going to go well for you guys if I don't see a script done. So please, please, please work on this today. Again, everything should be pretty clear in terms of where you are accessing the information. If all else fails, always remember there's the daily agenda that looks like this. There's the Edpuzzle here, there's the code, and then I'll also make sure that I put in the step 3 today and the PSA script outline. So thank you guys. I will see you on Thursday. Bye.